Hi, this is your host. And while perusing a website devoted to mysteries of antiquity, I came across this story, which I thought sufficiently bizarre to warrant further investigation. But no matter where I looked, I found little trace of this peculiar tale. Yet the phenomenon itself is a common enough occurrence. There have been several documented cases of mysterious disappearances of persons in connection with subsurface and/or aerial phenomena. And today we'll examine a very interesting one indeed. Let's begin with a bit of background. The ancient Greek Temple of Apollo in Hierapolis, now Pamukkale, Turkey, was once a part of the ancient Grecian Empire, which covered an extensive area in and around the Mediterranean Sea. Back in the year 63 BC, the city of Hierapolis was located near the edge of Phrygia in southern Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, about 200 miles northeast of ancient Ephesus. Strabo, a Greek philosopher who lived between 63 BC and 24 AD, described the temple in his writings. He mentioned in particular a nearby cavern which had a curious effect on people, as well as other living things which he believed to be an entrance into the land of the dead, ruled by the gods of the underworld. Strabo wrote, "There is a cave in the neighborhood of this city, the air of which, when it is breathed, occasions hiccups, and if anyone remains longer in the cave, death ensues." During the time of Strabo, the cavern was situated within walking distance of the Temple of Apollo, high atop a mountain ridge overlooking the city of Hierapolis. Since then, the temple has fallen into disrepair, being eroded away by the elements and the thousands of tourists that pass through every year. However, according to those who have visited the site, the cavern is still there. It hasn't moved. But let's look at a first-hand account. Let's dive into the source material from that long-ago time. Here is what the author wrote in the January 1989 issue of Omni magazine. Quoting from the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Strabo, who lived between 63 BC and 24 AD, to the effect that animals would often enter the cave and never return. Also, many people throughout history who went past the mouth of the cave never returned. The article also quoted one Sheldon Aronson, a professor of microbiology at Queen's College, NY, who told Omni that several Australian students had entered the cave and disappeared just a few days before his visit in 1987. Sheldon stated, "The Turkish government put iron bars over the opening to prevent other people from ever going in. As far as we knew, the Australians were never seen again." Strabo was not the only one to write about this cave. In fact, it appears in quite a few documents. Unfortunately, most of them are written in languages I do not know. What I find most fascinating is that the location of this cavern has apparently not changed over the past 2,000 years. One of the references used was a book called The Age of the Goddess by author John Anthony West. The section in question contains a first-hand account from an unnamed individual who visited the cave in the early 1980s, during which he spoke with a Turkish archaeologist who confirmed the location of the cave to be exactly where Strabo described it all those years ago. Additionally, according to this account, a local Turkish family apparently knew of the cave and how dangerous it was and would use it to settle arguments. If they were disputing whether someone was a coward or not, they would tell that person to go into the cave, and if they didn't come out, well, that settled the argument pretty quickly. A recent search online for articles or news reports mentioning the cave and its location did not produce any helpful results, except for a few websites which seemed to contain the same information repeated over and over. As for Professor Aronson's comments regarding the disappearance of several Australian students, nothing could be found to substantiate this claim. A search of the Queen's College website revealed no faculty member by that name, and a search of the Queen's College City University of New York Library revealed no publications by an author by that name either. Finally, a call to the college revealed that there is no record of anyone by that name ever having been employed there. However, the real mystery here is the apparent absence of the cave's location. Today, it should be noted that the original Temple of Apollo no longer stands. Eroded by the thousands of tourists that flock to the site every year, little remains of the structure today. But the cavern, according to those who have visited the site, is still there. It hasn't moved. If the cave really is there, why haven't archaeologists discovered it? Perhaps it's simply a coincidence that a cave exists at the exact location Strabo described 2,000 years ago. Or perhaps the cave really is there. We just haven't found it yet. Or maybe Strabo was wrong and the cave actually collapsed 2,000 years ago. This last theory seems unlikely considering how solid the other facts are. Strabo was an eyewitness to the destruction of the Temple of Apollo by the Goths. He mentions this in the same paragraph where he describes the cave. If he were wrong about the location of the cave, it seems unlikely that he would have been right about everything else. So what do you think? Do you believe that a cave in Turkey really is swallowing people, or do you believe that Strabo was mistaken? Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for watching. Now, in addition to the many comments already posted on this subject, I'd like to share a few additional thoughts. First, I want to say that I don't believe in coincidences. Therefore, if the cave really is there, it seems highly unlikely that Strabo would have accidentally described its location so accurately. Of course, it's possible that Strabo's writings were exaggerated or misinterpreted, but this seems highly unlikely as well. Furthermore, if the cave really is there, why hasn't it been discovered? Modern archaeological techniques are so precise that we can pinpoint the location of ancient sites to within a few feet. Why haven't these techniques been able to locate the cave? One possibility is that the cave is located within the boundaries of the Temple of Apollo. And since the temple is a protected historical site, access to it is restricted. It's possible that a team of archaeologists would need to petition the Turkish government for permission to excavate the area. And since no one is particularly interested in finding a cave, this is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Another possibility is that the cave is in such poor condition that it's no longer recognizable. Ancient caves can be treacherous places, even in the best of circumstances. Without proper equipment, it's easy to become lost or injured. It's possible that the cave has collapsed or filled with water, making it impossible to explore. Finally, it's possible that the cave simply doesn't exist. This seems highly unlikely given the number of first-hand accounts we have of it. But stranger things have happened. Ultimately, without access to the site, it's impossible to say for sure what happened. All we can do is speculate. Now, this story was shared with me by a viewer. They said that they remember reading this story in a magazine years ago and were intrigued by it. They couldn't find any evidence of the magazine or the story online, so they reached out to me in hopes that I might be able to find more information. I've done my best to research this story, but unfortunately, most of the evidence is in languages I don't understand. If any of our viewers speak those languages and can translate the texts, I would love to hear from you. The Earth's crust is riddled with cavities and chambers formed by ancient volcanic activity, erosion, tectonic shifts, and other natural forces. Some of these formations are familiar to us, such as the Flint Ridge, Mammoth Caves of Kentucky, or New Mexico's Carlsbad-Lechuguilla cavern systems. However, other higher-level cavities may also exist. Cavities which may dwarf the Flint Ridge Mammoth Caves of Kentucky, or New Mexico's Carlsbad-Lechuguilla cavern systems. It is suggested that these may contain conditions sufficient to support physical life, that is, air, water, subterranean flora and fauna, and perhaps even electromagnetically induced illumination diffused throughout the underground atmosphere through a phenomena somewhat similar to the effect produced by the aurora borealis, or northern lights. In this case, it has been suggested that powerful electromagnetic currents moving through the Earth and interacting with the underground atmosphere may account for the diffused twilight illumination permeating the underground atmosphere, as has been described in various accounts of those who claim to have managed to find their way into the more extensive and deeper cavern systems. There have been several accounts concerning individuals who have encountered human beings, some who spoke the native language and others who spoke a language entirely foreign, within deep underground tunnels and caverns. There are many such cases, but we will concern ourselves with only one of these at this point, and will reserve the others for later in the text. An incident which may be one of the most well-known and most well-documented accounts of this type. Sometime during the 12th century, a monastic chronicler in England by the name of Gervase of Tilbury recorded a strange account of two children who suddenly appeared near a small town near Bury St. Edmunds, England. The account was also recorded in the writings of several other chroniclers who lived at the time or some time afterwards. These include William of Newbury, Historia Rerum Anglicarum, written in Yorkshire, England, 1136-1198, Abbot Ralph of Coggeshall, Chronicon Anglicarum, and also the chroniclers Giraldus Cambrensis and Walsingham. After learning the children's story, the husband of the young girl sought to determine the exact location where the two children had emerged. And as he knew the local area quite well, he felt confident that he would be able to locate the entrance. He and his wife's brother set off immediately and soon came upon the same trenches or wolf pits, which the farmers had found the children in. However, even though the husband was convinced that he knew exactly where the subterranean opening might have been located, neither he nor anyone else was ever able to find it again. As mentioned previously, there are many other accounts of explorers who have found their way into the inner earth, some of which go back hundreds or thousands of years. The natives of the Hopi Nation in North America tell of an underworld inhabited by a race of giants. According to legend, these giants lived in a great city beneath the ground, a city reached by means of a shaft which connected to the surface world. This shaft, which was later sealed with a stone plug, was situated near the base of a great mountain known as the Doorway. Another Native American legend, this one coming from the Cherokee Nation, tells of an underworld city which was brilliantly lit and filled with golden palaces. According to this myth, a young girl accidentally stumbled into the underworld through a narrow crevice while gathering medicinal herbs. Once inside, she found the city of the subterranean people, a people whose skin was white, hair was red, and whose eyes glowed like golden embers. The girl lived with the subterranean people for some time before finding her way back to the surface world. Other legends come from the Filipinos who tell of an underworld inhabited by little people, and the Australian Aboriginals who speak of a subterranean race of giants. Even Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, made mention of a race of giants who dwelt beneath the earth. It is possible that these myths are simply that. Myths handed down through the ages from one generation to the next, or they may contain kernels of truth. Many of the aforementioned stories make mention of landscapes which resemble our own, places with rivers, mountains, and valleys. Could it be that these tales refer to the vast underground caverns and chambers which scientists now know exist beneath our feet? It is possible. Could it be that the people who accidentally discovered these places were in fact the ancestors of the creatures who dwell within? Also possible. It has been suggested that many of the creatures who dwell in these places are of diminutive stature, yet possess human-like characteristics, much like the mythical fairies and goblins of folklore. Others have claimed that these creatures stand between 4 and 8 feet tall, yet bear striking resemblances to humans. There are even some reports of creatures who stand as tall as 12 feet, with long necks, huge heads, and large bodies. If the descriptions given by eyewitnesses can be believed, the inhabitants of the inner earth live in advanced cities illuminated by electric lights. They also seem to possess advanced technology, and yet they appear to live simple lives, surviving mainly on plants and animals. Their societies seem to be egalitarian, peaceful, and highly spiritual. In fact, many who have encountered these beings have reported that they are highly evolved spiritually, and many of them are said to have incredible powers over the forces of nature. In addition to the landscapes which resemble our own, There are also vast underground seas teeming with life, many of which have never seen the sunlight of the world above. Yet there are entire ecosystems existing beneath our feet with unique plant and animal species which have evolved to survive in complete darkness. What's more, there are vast underground lakes and rivers, some of which are said to connect to the surface via underwater caves. It has been suggested that the legendary cities of Atlantis and Lemuria, which are said to have been swallowed by the sea, actually sank beneath the earth, and their people survived in the inner earth. It is said that the inner earth is divided into several different levels, each separated by vast expanses of emptiness. Each level is said to have its own unique environment, topography, and inhabitants. The lowest levels are said to be incredibly hot, creating molten seas and lakes of fire. Conversely, the upper levels are said to be incredibly cold, creating vast glaciers and ice sheets. Some say that there are portals to other dimensions and universes, which allow travelers to move freely between worlds. Others say that there are portals to the past and future, allowing time travelers to move backwards and forwards through the timeline. It is said that those who travel to the inner earth must follow strict laws in order to avoid detection by the inner earth dwellers, including never making eye contact with any of the creatures, never picking up or disturbing anything that belongs to them, and never taking any inner earth materials back to the surface. Those who violate these laws are said to be banished from the inner earth forever and may even be hunted down and killed by the inhabitants. The idea that our earth is hollow is not a new one. In fact, it has been around for centuries. The ancient Greeks believed that the earth was hollow and that it was inhabited by a race of giants. The biblical story of Adam and Eve also alludes to a hollow earth, as does the Norse legend of Asgard. There are many other examples which could be cited, but suffice it to say that the idea of a hollow earth is deeply ingrained in human mythology. In modern times, the idea of a hollow earth has been popularized by authors such as John Keel and Richard C. Hoagland, both of whom have written extensively on the subject. Keel, in particular, has claimed that there is a vast network of underground caverns and chambers which stretch from pole to pole. He has also claimed that there are entrances to these caverns all over the earth, but that they are hidden from view by natural phenomena such as waterfalls and caves. Hoagland, on the other hand, has claimed that the Earth is actually a spaceship, which is inhabited by a race of highly advanced aliens. He has also claimed that the Earth was hollowed out thousands of years ago by a race of ancient builders, and that it has been used as a prison for the souls of the damned. Regardless of who is right, one thing is certain: there is a lot more to our planet than meets the eye. So the next time you feel like the world is boring or that there's nothing new to discover, just remember that there are entire worlds beneath our feet which have never been explored, and who knows what wonders they may hold. A somewhat similar incident may have been repeated in the small hamlet of Banjos, or Banos, Spain, in August of 1887, several hundred years after the incident at Wolf Pits and several hundred miles distant. We state that it may have been repeated to some degree simply because there appears to be some confusion surrounding the Banjos account, apparently due to the possibility that some well-meaning researcher may have confused the two incidents, in essence, attributing some of the events that in fact took place near Wolf Pits with the Banjos account. Basically, the Banjos incident reportedly involved two children with greenish skin who emerged from a cavern near the town, not pits or excavations, spoke an unknown language and so on, although the details are sketchy. Some of the accounts of the Banjos incident repeat the Wolf Pits story almost verbatim, as if, as we said, someone somewhere mistakenly confused the two events, perhaps due to a lack of detail in the Banjos Spain account. Whatever the case, it seems that something of this general nature also occurred in this Spanish hamlet, even though the exact sources of that particular story are more difficult to trace than are the sources for the Wolf Pits account. Paris Flamand refers to this account in his book, The Age of Flying Saucers, Hawthorne Books, NY, Pi 197. having learned it from an article in the September 1967 issue of Orbit magazine, which in either turn gave credit to an article in the wohlbetuend August 1967 issue of Dan Fry's Understanding magazine. Fry claimed that he got the story from an article by John Macklin, which appeared in the December 1966 issue of Grit magazine. The account also appears in John Macklin's book, Strange Destinies. There are those who believe that similar cavern systems exist below the southwest United States, and that the Dulce base in New Mexico was originally an entrance to one of these ancient underground kingdoms. Sources say that the humans, possibly the ancestors of the Pueblos, once ruled this underground kingdom. One abductee reported an abduction wherein he saw himself traveling in a craft through an immense cavern below, the Grand Canyon. In one end of the cavern were the ruins of an ancient city, and in one of the walls he could see what appeared to be an elevator type of device that ascended the wall and disappeared through the roof. In 1994, a file appeared over the internet which originated from a person who claimed to be involved in a secret group of Hopi Indian youth, boys, and girls who were being trained by Hopi elders and a race of human-like aliens codenamed the Blues. The Blues were star warriors who were in conflict with the Greys, which they referred to as the Children of the Serpent, a race of psychic vampires which feed off the passions and in some cases the blood of human beings. The Blues, the children of the EI feather, were one of several human-like races that had warned our government from having anything to do with the Greys in the first place. The reptilians have established themselves in the underground systems below the Four Corners area, in the very systems from which the Hopis themselves were driven by the reptilian sorcerers in ancient times. The Hopis emerged through a cave in the Grand Canyon, and according to Hank Crastman, who claims to have visited the underground city of Palat Quapi below Arizona, the Hopis today, both surface and subsurface dwelling, still consider the Greys of the Four Corners systems and elsewhere to be their enemies. Crastman says that the residents of Palat Quapi maintain some interaction with the Neo-Mayan races of Mat Shasta, who maintain a large underground city near Prescott Groom Creek, Arizona. They have also interbred with members of the Nordic or Pleiadian Federation. In relation to Dulce, researcher once gave what appears to be a description of the joint Illuminati-Grey Dulce underground base network below the Four Corners area, as described by researcher James Mosley. The intimations of strange pressure groups, purportedly intent upon obscuring the true meaning of flying saucers, began arising in the early 1950s, the most famous of these being the Three Men in Black and the Silence Conspiracy, which Major Kehoe and others regard as an ominous element functioning within the Air Force. During the summer of 1956, Saucer News editor James Mosley postulated an addition to this enigmatic company in the June 1956 issue of his magazine, theorizing that flying saucers were originally being researched by the United States in 1946, were capable of speeds exceeding 4,000 miles an hour, and were operating from a super-secret subterranean base below a southwestern state. He continued, "The whole project is so highly classified that ordinary military pilots and even the Air Force's saucer investigators on Project Blue Book could not possibly know about it. In fact, this type of saucer is not built by the American government, as we ordinarily understand the word government. As fantastic as this might sound, these saucers are actually built, operated, and maintained by an organization which is entirely separate from the military and political branches of the government that we know about. Although a handful of people at the very top of the government know about the existence of this project, they have no direct contact with it. I shall call this secret project the organization." James Mosley considerably elaborated on the activities of this shadowy cabal with some very extravagant revelations. The Jesuit Agnello Oliva, 1572-1542, recorded the words of an old Inca Quipu reader to the effect that the real Tiahuanaco was a subterranean city exceeding the one above ground in vastness. It was believed that the entrance to the underground apartments could be gained through 4 tunnels. Last century, one passage was evidently found as treasure hunters managed to get in to look for gold, but only one came out. He brought out with him 2 gold bars, but left behind his sanity. After this incident, the Peruvian government decided to wall up the cave entrance. This tunnel, according to other sources, was actually hidden among the ruins of Fort Sacsayhuaman, outside of and above the city of Cusco, Peru. The explorers allegedly found their way into ancient treasure caves beneath the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, and most of them subsequently became lost in the dark, labyrinthine maze, except for the man who returned with 2 gold bars. There are, however, rumors that the tunnels beneath Cusco eventually connect with others below Lima, Peru, as well as different parts of the Peruvian Andes, including the Lake Titicaca region. Dr. Clifford Wilson, in his UFOs and Their Mission Impossible, 1974, Signet Books, NY, relates the following account, submitted by police officer and abductee Harold Schirmer, spelled Schirmer by others, who was the subject of experimentation by the alien group known as the Greys. He claimed that he was told where UFO bases were. Although he could not understand it, he stated there were UFO bases both underground and underwater. He wondered if perhaps these beings were careful to guard their own interests, for they gave no information that would actually endanger themselves. However, they did say that one base was out in the ocean away from Florida, out toward Bermuda. This is in the area of the infamous Bermuda Triangle, where so many ships and even aircraft have mysteriously disappeared during this century. Schirmer was further told that this particular vehicle was an observation craft, and that the occupants had been sent to collect samples of animals and vegetation. He remembered also that he was told that some humans had been used in breeding experiments. He was convinced that something was done to the brain patterns of those who were captured, and was definite that he himself had been changed, as was evidenced by his earlier withholding of details of the sighting. By his obedience, he had become almost robot-like, ready to do whatever they told him to do. On July 14, 1974, an article by Stony Brakefield appeared in the Pennsylvania newspaper, News Extra, reporting an incident which allegedly took place in 1944 near this small coal mining town. Yet because of its nature, it had been covered up for nearly 40 years until the son of the mining inspector who investigated the incident revealed it as his father, then deceased, had related it to him. His mining inspector and a fellow investigator had been called in to look into a cave-in in one of the Dixonville mines. About 15 men had either been killed or turned up missing altogether in the strange disaster. Once inside the mine, the inspectors eventually came across the first victim. Although lying under a broken timber, surrounded by some fallen rocks and rubble, they concluded that the cave-in certainly could not have been large enough to kill the man. The inspectors were shocked to find that the body of the miner was lacerated with claw-like markings from some unknown creature. They continued and found a few other bodies, all dead and some of which had similar claw-like marks covering them. Several other miners had vanished and were nowhere to be seen in spite of subsequent diggings. This tragedy apparently took place after the miners had broken into an ancient tunnel of unknown origin deep in the mine. This tunnel, at the time the inspectors didn't fully recognize it as the recently discovered passage or drift, was then followed by the inspectors at approximately a 45-degree angled downwards for about half a mile until they arrived at a room which seemed to be the end of the passage. At this point, the passage behind them just happened to collapse. Many accounts indicate that these underground creatures can manipulate the earth and rock and create cave-ins at will, as was the case in the Maltese incident mentioned earlier in the text. A follow-up team was sent in to intersect the inspectors while this was taking place. This other crew followed the tracks of the inspectors into the mysterious tunnel and eventually found the cave-in and began digging through in hopes of finding the now missing investigators. In the meanwhile, one inspector, the father of the man who released the story to the press, suddenly felt something like hot breath on the back of his neck. He closed his eyes, too terrified to see what the thing was. As the other workers were breaking through, the creature, left by some unseen route, perhaps frightened away. The other inspector who was with him, however, observed the whole thing, and in wild-eyed horror he exclaimed, "That thing was not of this world!" One account concerning the underground appeared in an early issue of Caveat Emptor magazine, P.O. Box 4553, Metuchen, NJ 088204533, and spoke of a physical encounter with a subterranean race humans. The account was related by an individual whose girlfriend, Larissa, had phoned him one night. She was quite shaken up and in tears, and told him that a friend of hers at school had invited her to go for a ride with her out into the countryside. This girlfriend was somewhat strange and a loner and would often disappear and be away from school for days or even weeks at a time. As they were driving through the countryside, according to Larissa, this girl drove her car right towards a hill, and before she knew what was happening, the hill opened up into an underground road, and they eventually found themselves right in the middle of an underground city. She went on to say that the city was inhabited by the D-Forces, a human group who used the symbol of a wolf on jewelry, etc., and who were in conflict with another human group called the T-Forces. Both, she learned, possessed UFO-type craft, and the T-Forces were less powerful but were growing stronger day by day. Could this somehow tie in with Richard Shaver's scenario of an underground battle with Daros and Taros? The only difference would be that Shaver's Taros were basically friendly people, and his Daros seemed to be a conglomeration of degenerate human techno-sorcerers whose minds and bodies have been affected by long-term exposure to radiation, who seemed to be in league with a race power-hungry Atlantean androids that had gone out of control thousands of years ago, and what Shaver refers to as the vermin from space, a race of reptilian hominoids that are returning to planet Earth to reclaim what they allege to be their native planet. Theodore Ilian, in his book Darkness over Tibet, told of the inhabitants of an underground city beneath Tibet, a city which the author himself claimed to have stumbled on during his extensive travels through the Far East. This underground community was allegedly ruled over by a powerful sorcerer who was part of an international secret society. This overlord kept the inhabitants of the underground city, many of whom were people who had disappeared from the world above, under complete mind control to the point that they lacked any personality. Their eyes were reported by Ilian as being vacant and empty, and their lives emotionless and drone-like, much like an ant colony. Or in other words, they acted much like certain of the MIB-like beings who have been encountered by UFO witnesses. This sorcerer was allegedly in contact with an infernal reptilian race via a bottomless shaft which descended through the city itself. When Ted Ilian asked the sorcerer overlord where the shaft led, he was told that if he found out he would die. There are such secrets. Ilian claimed that he barely escaped the hypnotic hold of the sorcerer and fled the city, and after surviving a series of terrifying poltergeist and psychic attacks directed at him by the sorcerer, he finally found his way back to civilization and safe. At this point, we will quote from one of the many sources describing encounters with what may very well be a remnant of an antediluvian tunnel network that the Atlanteans or their contemporaries had constructed before the deluge. The following account was given in a letter which was submitted to Amazing Stories, which described itself as a science fiction science fact magazine. December 1946 issue, page 162. The letter was from a George A. Lehue of, at the time, 1918 W. Newport Ave, Chicago, ILL. Lehue wrote, "Sirs, I have been a reader of amazing stories for a very long time. I, too, know of one of these entrances into the world below. It is about 50 miles south of Pittsburgh, Pa, in the first range of the Allegheny Mountains. My experiment with the caves have been only partial explorations, consisting of traveling about 1.25 miles down into the cave itself and returning. The cave is ventilated from below and stays at a constant 50 degrees, no matter what the outside temperature may be. It is a series of rooms or galleries with narrow passages from one to another. In about the 6th room down, there is a large tree trunk which could not have come from the surface, as the stratosphere, Branton, is almost completely free from local fault. And it could never have come down through the openings in the cave itself, as they were small at the top and kept getting progressively larger as they got deeper. I traveled down as long as I could find comparatively easy travel, about 45-degree descent all the way, and finally came to what I thought must be the end of the cave, for I could see no more openings into rooms, but on closer examination found instead a bore about 6 feet across, straight down into solid rock. I turned my flash downward and could see that it must have gone straight down for at least 100 feet. The sides were perfectly smooth, and the shaft, or bore, in a perfect round, no apparent irregularities anywhere. I had no way of descending any further, so I retraced my steps back up through the different rooms to the top of the mountain where the cave opens into this world. I made discreet inquiries of several old-timers in that region and found that in 1915, or about that year, 6 surveyors took gear and equipment and spent a month in exploration of the cave, going 18 miles from the entrance and down almost 5 miles below sea level. I have never gone back, but I hope to someday in the future, with escort, equipment, and supplies. I'd certainly love to see the machine that made that bore. If you have any information on other caves in that area, let me know. They too may tie in with this one, though if they do, their connections are very deep. Also, if you can, please describe the equipment that made that vertical shaft. Oh yes, one more interesting item. The surveyors in their exploration of the cave distinctly heard the rumble of machinery, but their calculations proved they were nowhere near a large city, surface, and they were too deep for surface noises otherwise. What is the answer? Another account, also dealing with subsurface phenomena and creatures, appeared in the June 1945 issue of Amazing Stories, in a letter submitted to that magazine by Jerry Lapriore, at the time, of 2024 Pleasant St. Fall River, Mass. The letter stated, "You asked for stories that might relate to the caves. My mother was told this story by an old man who said it was true as truth itself. This man and a friend were hunting, agreeing this time to go to a portion of the woods to which they did not normally go. They saw a deer and gave chase. It jumped through a clump of bushes, and they followed, to find themselves, unaccountably, in the strangest surroundings. They were in a huge cavern that had numerous passageways leading from it. Before them was a monster-like man they thought was the devil himself. The monster stared, and the 2 men stared back. One of them fainted from fear, and the man who told my mother the story dragged the other away in panic, and as he did so, found himself just as mysteriously in the forest again. The old man's friend died a week later as a result of the shock he had suffered. The old man tried later to find the cave again, but failed. I know this story is true because my mother does not tell fairy tales, and because she believes it. In April 1972, a reader submitted a letter to Fate magazine describing what, if true, may be one of the more remarkable encounters with a subterranean civilization. The letter, which appeared below the heading Spirits or Subterranean Beings, stated, 2 years ago, my small son Danny and I were playing in his bedroom when we heard a sharp metallic sound, as if a large steel hammer had struck the concrete basement floor 3 times. It took us so by surprise that Danny began to cry. I was merely curious because I had heard a noise like that several months earlier in or beneath the living room. I decided to lie down on the bedroom floor with my ear to it. I clearly heard the roar of machinery, or I should say a hum. As I listened, I heard something or somebody moving around and fidgeting with what sounded like machinery. I quickly got up and fetched a small hammer from my husband's took chest and began to tap the floor, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, etc. I had continued for about 5 minutes when, to my surprise, the being beneath the floor began to tap back, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As I listened, I heard a series of noises and knocks, and then a man's voice began to speak, not to me, but to someone else. His words were too muffled to understand. I called the local police and asked if there were any underground installations in our town, and they said there were not. Frequently after that, I would place my ear to the floor, and always I could hear the hum of machinery, but never again the man's voice. It is my opinion that races of people live far beneath the earth in vast networks of caverns, and they have access to miracle machinery that can project sound and even images to the earth's surface. I wonder if we are confusing these subterranean beings with spirits? Wanda Lockwood, Bakersfield, Calif. One researcher by the name of Frank D. Adams has written about the results of his own personal scientific experiments, which may prove that giant cavities exist in granite at depths of more than 11 miles, conclusions which have also been supported by Louis V. King, a mathematician who calculated that, at normal temperatures, a cavity would exist at a depth of between 17.2 and 20.9 miles. The author's findings are also supported by the recently discovered 16 Rouse belts, which give planes of fracture penetrating the globe. Dr. Ron Anjard, in an article in the summer 1978 issue of Pursuit magazine, claimed personal knowledge of 44 underground cities beneath the surface of North America, 6 of which are alleged to be on the West Coast. His information comes from anonymous American Indian sources. When we relate this to the large number of migration legends to and from cavern realms, which exist among the native Amerindians, then we may conclude that certain tribes still retain intimate knowledge of underground civilizations who are related to them via distant ancestral links. In the case of the Hopi Indians, according to Dr. Hank Crastman, certain Hopi elders maintain contact with their subterranean cousin tribes to this day. There are also indications that some entire tribes literally moved underground as a result of the encroaching Anglo-Saxon invasion of the Americas. Similar allegations are made in relation to the Mayas, the Incas, and several other Central and South American tribes as well. Carl Brugger, in his book The Chronicle of Akakor, gives the history, as given to the author by one of their chiefs, of the Uga Mongolala tribesmen, whose ancestors were allegedly part of a vast empire which covered South America in ancient times. Some of these ancient people, the chief claimed, left the planet in aerial vessels to explore other parts of the solar system and beyond, leaving behind vast subterranean cities beneath the Andes Mountains and western Brazil. In 1971, due to the constant encroachment of white settlers or invaders into their territory, 30,000 survivors of the Uga Mongolala allegedly escaped to this ancient system of underground cities, consisting of 13 separate subterranean complexes, all connected by tunnels, one of which is said to extend to Lima, and others of which are located throughout the Andes mountain range of Peru. Michael Burke, in his article Green Thing Sparks Rumors, New Kensington, Tarentum, and Vandergrift, Madar 5, 1981 issue, described a short lizard-like creature which has been seen walking on 2 legs like a man, was reportedly about 3 feet tall, and half humanoid and half dinosaur. The creature was seen emerging from a sewer tunnel near New Kensington. A group of children chased the infant or young dinosauroid, one of the more courageous of them momentarily grabbing it from behind, at which point it let out a squealing or screeching sound and then slipped from his hands and escaped back into the sewer tunnel. In later encounters, children attempted to pour gasoline on the creature and light it on fire, although most of the fuel fell on the ground and the reptilioid escaped unscathed. Dr. Erline Cheney, in an article titled Odyssey into Egypt, which appeared in her occult-oriented magazine Voice of Astara, May 1982, tells of a discovery she and researcher Bill Cox were shown during their tour of Egypt. Their tour guides confided to the two mystics their knowledge of two tunnels, neither of which had been fully explored. One was in the Temple of Edfu between Luxor and Cairo in the ruins of El Tuna Gabal, and the other near Zozer's Step Pyramid at Cairo near Memphis Saqqara within the tomb of the bull called Serapeum. The Egyptian government reportedly sealed both tunnels because of fears of certain archaeologists that the tunnels lead too deeply down into the depths of the earth, and because they found the earth to be honeycombed with passages leading off into other depths, and the possibility of explorers becoming lost. If such labyrinths do exist, then it may explain one story concerning strange men dressed like ancient Egyptians, who have been seen, according to witnesses, deep within unexplored tunnels below the region of Cairo and the Great Pyramids. This may also be a possible confirmation of an account which appeared in Nevada Aerial Research's Leading Edge publication, to the effect that the U.S. government secretly maintains a huge base within a cavern of tremendous size, several miles in diameter, beneath the desert sands of Egypt. Could this tie in with the vague references to the subterranean culture or cultures known as the Phoenix Empire, according to Commander X, who alleged that representatives of this empire have been seen in the deeper levels of the Dulce base, and the Gizeh or Giza people, a subterranean cult of Illuminati-like imperialists who, so the Pleiadians claim, are working with other power groups in a covert attempt to take over the governments of planet Earth. Vaughn M. Green, in a letter which appeared in issue number 14 of Richard Toronto's Shavertron letter zine, spoke of a possible entrance to cavern systems near the bottom of the elevator landing within the Hoover Dam facility near Las Vegas, not far from the Mojave Desert, which holds back Lake Mead. Several people have reported unusual alien encounters near this reservoir. Early construction workers allegedly broke into and probably resealed large caverns while blasting out the cliffs near the base of the dam. In the lower elevator landing, according to Mr. Green, there was a wild tile inlay on the floor with signs of the zodiac and all sorts of stuff suggesting an entrance. He suggests a possible connection between this and the caverns which the workers reportedly broke into. Could this tie in with similar accounts given by others that an underground base exists beneath Page, Arizona? This underground facility is believed by several sources to connect the S4 underground base in Nevada to the Dulce underground base in New Mexico via tube line. The Glen Canyon, Lake Powell hydroelectric dam in Page might provide a power source for such an underground installation and is the most likely area in or around Page for an entrance. A deep gorge several hundred feet deep leading into the Grand Canyon, a large government facility, a hydroelectric power source, etc. This is, however, only supposition. It is said that Navajo Dam, by the way, is a major power source that supplies a considerable percentage of electricity for the upper human-occupied levels of the Dulce base. This may suggest that other similar bases are at least partially powered by hydroelectric dams. Paxson C. Hayes, in writings of his which appeared in early issues of BSRF's Borderland Sciences Research Foundation's publication Round Robin, referred to the discovery, one which he claimed to have made himself, of the mummified remains of a race of 7 tall humans who lived in huge caverns 9,000 feet below the surface of North America. Dana Howard, in her book Vesta, the Earthborn Venusian, includes a chapter in her book which tells of a remnant of an ancient race or human civilization still in existence underground. These hidden people are said to reside within one of the mountain ranges adjacent to the Imperial Valley area on the outskirts of the Mojave Desert of California. John A. Keel, on Pira 145 of his book The Mothman Prophecies, states, An engineer, Rex Ball, swears he came upon a mysterious underground installation in Georgia in 1940, manned by small, oriental-looking men in coveralls and a few American military officers. When he was caught in the tunnels, one of the officers issued the curt command, "Make him look like a nut." He woke up in a field, uncertain whether his experience had been real or a dream. That seems to be the battle cry of the phenomena. Make him look like a nut. And on P-192 of the same book, a man on Long Island informed Keel that he was frantically making preparations for the big evacuation. He even traveled to a secret underground flying saucer base in a black Cadillac with a dashboard festooned with flashing colored lights, where he participated in a dry run. Other normal human beings were present, he said, and manned various kinds of equipment to communicate with the rescue spaceships somewhere overhead. Funny thing, John, he mused. All the equipment was manufactured by Western Electric, Hallicrafters, and other U.S. companies. Tal Levesque, in an article titled Underground UFO Base Suspected by Officials in Washington, which appeared in the Volume 2, No. 2 issue of the Hollow Hassle, described a suspected UFO base which is believed by some to lie under the Yakima Indian Reservation southeast of Tacoma, Washington. The book, The Life of the Cave, by Moore and Paulson, 1966, gives evidence of extended animal migration underground beneath the central eastern U.S., indicated by troglodytes, cave-dwelling animals, found in widely separated caves which are identical with each other, indicating past interconnections which have become blocked. These caverns are found from time to time during deep drilling operations. A researcher by the name of John Singer stated the following in an article of his which appeared in the Missing Link newsletter. Our nation's capital has its share of Fortean mysteries. There is supposed to be a tunnel complex under the Octagon House at 1741 New York Avenue, NW. Dr. John Thornton, the architect who designed the Capitol building, built some, but not all, of the tunnels. The course of at least 2 of the tunnels is known. One is supposed to go to the White House, and the other supposedly leads to the Potomac. The tunnels are supposedly blocked up. Jim Brandon, on P58 of his book, Weird America, 1978, E.P. Dutton & Co.'s in NY, added that the tunnels built by Dr. Thornton were only part of a much older and larger tunnel network constructed by colonists from Atlantis. Unfortunately, his sources were 2 unidentified psychics, so this must be a fascinating rumor. Note: this would depend upon whether these revelations were received by these psychics via entirely metaphysical or occultic means, in which case they should be viewed with great suspicion, or whether they based their claims on actual physical accounts. However, Richard Toronto, editor of Shavertron, claimed that some years ago, as a result of a printed request for information on subterranean anomalies, a scientist contacted him offering a 10-page report on a system of tunnels he had personally investigated beneath Washington, D.C. He stated that the tunnels were built by a very ancient race, and that the walls consisted of a diamond-hard, glassy, or glaze-like substance, similar to other deep tunnels that have been described as existing beneath the surface of northern Arkansas and elsewhere. As far as we know, Mr. Toronto never did actually get his hands on the report. Brad Steiger, in his book Strange Disappearances, Lancer Books, NY 1972, related the following MIB-related incident. At sundown on February 12, 1953, witnesses told police that they had watched an automobile enter the throat of a storm drain near Willowbrook and Greenleaf Avenues in Los Angeles. Officers arrived on the scene within 10 minutes, and according to the Los Angeles Herald and Express, they followed the fresh tire tread marks into the tunnel for 7 miles. Other policemen and flood control district workers continued the search for the automobile by dropping through manhole covers. The trackdown continued until midnight, when 7 miles up the storm drain, the tracks vanished. Herald and Express newsmen, who had accompanied the police on the incredible search up the tube, were witnesses to the fact that, in the muddy silt covering, The floor of the drain, the tire tread marks were sharp and fresh, then no more tracks. Stephen Brody was a man of many talents and hobbies, among them painting and rock collecting. Several years back, he decided to investigate a certain area in Arizona where, he had heard, quartz crystals could be found in abundance. Brody convinced a friend of his, also an avid rock collector, to join him on a rock hunting expedition to the site. After purchasing a ticket on a passenger train, they traveled to a certain small community in Arizona, which was near the area that they desired to explore. According to researcher John J. Robinson, who related the account as he heard it from Steve Brody, the name of the Arizona town was not given. John J. Robinson, by the way, was a well-known ufologist in the 1950s, and the account as it was related to him was discussed by Robinson during an interview, which was heard by tens of thousands of listeners to the Long John Nebel radio talk show on station WOR of New York in March of 1957. The two rockhounds had their eyes on one particular bluff, which they could see in the distance from the town they were in. Other town residents heard about their plans and warned them against going to that bluff, stating that several people had in the past disappeared without a trace in that area. Brody and his friend blew off their warnings, considering them mere superstitions, which they should not take seriously, and set out towards the forbidden bluff. They had no sooner approached the base of the high bluff than out of the shadows emerged two beings who were each cowled in a dark cloak and hood, making it very difficult to discern their features or whether they were even human or not. After being confronted, Brody's friend panicked and attempted to make a run for it. Steve swore that at this point one of the black-cloaked figures raised some kind of weapon and a brilliant pencil beam of light shot from it and hit his friend, who cried out in agony and immediately fell down motionless. From what Brody could gather, his friend had been killed, although he never did see his body after that. Following this, one of the beings came up to Brody, who did not resist but stood where he was. While still in a state of shock, one of the creatures placed some type of device over his head like a metal headset with two metallic discs, which fitted over his temples. At this point, he started to lose consciousness. The next thing Steve remembered after gaining consciousness again was of being in some type of dungeon or cavern-like enclosure within a prison-like cell. Other humans were there as well. Most of the people there seemed to be under some type of trance or mind control, and as far as he knew, he was one of them. He dimly recalls waking up a few times, but usually when this happened, one of the dark-robed creatures would come over to the cage or enclosure where he was and point a rod-shaped device at him, at which point he would black out again. During one of his brief conscious episodes, he had a chance to talk to another prisoner, a girl who told him that their dark-robed captors were known as the Darrow. That basically was all that he remembered. The incredible part of the story, however, was the fact that several months afterwards he suddenly came to and found himself conscious once again. He suddenly realized that he was walking down the streets of New York City. He had no idea how he got there or where he had been the past 6 months. It was like waking up out of a bad dream or nightmare, the majority of which he could not remember. In addition to this, he found that someone had given him a haircut. He didn't know whom. Whether or not this account has any connection to the many rumors of strange and ancient caverns and tunnels below New York City is uncertain. Some cautiously speak of such tunnels as being used by a MIB-like secret society, some of these tunnels connecting with the lowest sub-basements of the Empire State Building and other Manhattan structures. Some allege that such tunnels are the possible destination of many of those who mysteriously end up missing in New York City every year. Whether these are mere unfounded rumors is anyone's guess, at least until solid evidence surfaces to prove such accounts. John J. Robinson made several visits to Mr. Brody, and from his perceptions of the men, he felt that Brody was sincere in what he was saying, but Steve was constantly paranoid and in fear that he was being followed, or that someone or something was constantly watching or stalking him. Also, Steve Brody would often paint bizarre, otherworldly landscapes, even though he wasn't used to painting in that style until after his experience, which Robinson thought peculiar. Then one day, Robinson stopped by Brody's apartment to pay him a visit, and he was nowhere to be found. No one seemed to know what happened to him, and that was the last time Mr. Robinson ever saw Steve again. The Steve Brody account, incidentally, was also related in an article in the Voller 1, No. 3, 1971 issue of Strange magazine, and also in early issues of Saucer News, of which John J. Robinson, who lived in Jersey City, New Jersey at the time, was assistant editor. In his book, On the Shores of Endless Worlds, Andrew Thomas, in his chapter, Labyrinths and Serpents, states, according to legend, King Minos of Crete ordered his architect Daedalus to construct the labyrinth, a maze of passages so ingeniously devised that even the builder himself could not find his way without a plan. In the center lived the Minotaur, half bull, half human, to whom the Greeks sent 7 youths and 7 maidens as a tribute every 9 years. The Minotaur was slain by Theseus, who was able to find his way out of the labyrinth thanks to a ball of thread given to him by Ariadne. This myth has been interpreted as an historical record of the construction of the Palace of Minos in Knossos, which contains innumerable galleries and rooms. On the other hand, this myth may have an entirely different interpretation, similar to a cryptogram, which conceals the existence of a secret repository of underground chambers and passages. Although this might seem to be just a legend, there are actual accounts of alleged encounters with paraphysical, part supernatural, part physical, demoniacal creatures, such as the satyrs, centaurs, and minotaurs, etc., which have been described in Greek mythology. Such encounters often involve paraphysical poltergeist-like phenomena and manipulation of mind and matter. According to some sources, a race of beings possessing a combination of humanoid, angelic, and animal-like characteristics predated Adamic civilization and were involved in the original rebellion and conspiracy against the Creator. Other mythical beings, such as merpeople, unicorns, fairies, and such, were also traditionally involved in the fall. Like the angels themselves, some of them were deceived by the followers of Lucifer, whereas others escaped the fall and remained true to the Creator. The creatures mentioned in the 9th chapter of the Book of Revelation may be this type of demonic or fallen entity. These creatures were apparently distinct from the purely spiritual, angelic, and fallen angelic beings. Whether the following account describes an encounter with such a fallen race remains to be seen. The letter we quote here appeared in the winter 1962 issue of The Hidden World, one of several publications which grew out of the Shaver mystery controversy of the late 1940s. Mr. Richard Shaver, hoping this letter finds you in the best of health. My name is Frank J. Mezda. I live in the county of Imperial Valley, city of Calexico, California. Through accident, I happened to stumble into your book, Hidden World, issue number A1, and just recently, A2. I sometimes wonder if it was luck or deliberate action on the part of a tarot. All my life, I have been looking and asking for certain unsolved and unanswered questions regarding civilization, our ancestors, and the beginning of time. I believe your book gave me the best answers. Let me tell you a few of my expeditions. 2 years ago, we went treasure hunting in the interior of Mexico, which turned out to be a flop. But in that excursion, some strange things happened to us, which at the time we wrote off as superstition. We went to this place where we were supposed to enter, but suddenly a fright with chills came over me. Something I had never felt before. Something like a sixth sense. Like if I knew something was going to happen to me. I didn't go in, and neither did anybody else. Next day, we approached the cave again. Only this time I wasn't afraid, and I let the group inside. This cave was tremendous in size and leading passages everywhere. Some of these passages or chambers, sometimes being 30 out high and 100 out long, contained connecting tunnels. We finally gave up, but in retrieving, we found 2 leading passages instead of the one we had entered. This startled us, and we set to investigate the second tunnel. It just kept winding and going down, so we finally gave up and got out of there. When we got back to the village, we struck a conversation with two Mexican Indians, and they told us that whatever we did, not to go into the enchanted caves. We got curious and asked them where these so-called enchanted caves were. They gave us directions, and that was exactly where we had entered a few days ago. We asked them what happened in these caves. They told us that people that went in there never came out, that while in there, the entrances and tunnels would change, which happened to us, and we didn't know about this till after we had been in there. Then they told us the strangest thing, which at the time we said these people are superstitious. They said that they went with an expedition with 20 or 30 men hired by an American man to look into this cave. This happened about 10 or 15 years ago, they said. 4 or 5 of the men had revolvers. They were well equipped with lights and tools. While they were working there, all of a sudden in the far end there appeared a half-man and bullhead like a bull upright. This description fits the one you have on your front cover on issue A1, and next to him was a naked midget or little boy. They pulled out their revolvers, but they wouldn't fire, and their lights went out. There was confusion, and several men were killed in the scramble, and nobody returned after that. Frank J. Mezda, 939 Genge, Calexico, Calif. David Perkins, in a letter of his which appeared in the Volume 1, Number 1 issue of The Hollow Hassle, told of a strange breathing well that drillers had broken into 17 miles east of Walsenburg, CO. Other strange occurrences had been found on the ranch or farm where the well was located, including unexplained cattle mutilations. Representatives from the Colorado School of Mines came out to investigate the well, which seemed to breath in and out with the rising and falling of the tides, and they excitedly suggested that a tunnel lay below which may have connected with a similar tunnel which the Colorado School of Mines had tracked from the Gulf of Mexico and as far as Oklahoma. A possible connection to this: one source alleged that an alternative 002 type of underground city, maintained by a secret society, can be entered via a lodge in the Uncompahgre Mountains, also in southwest Colorado. Also, a large Masonic park exists in this same area. Any connection? Morris K. Jessup's The Case for the UFO, Annotated Edition, a classic collector's item republished by Gray Barker in a limited edition, was first reprinted by the Varro Corplallers of Texas. This was an electronics firm which was commissioned to print the book specifically for the Navy. The original Case for the UFO, written by ufologist Morris K. Jessup, was not too revealing in itself, but was merely a collection of theories and documented sightings of UFOs, just like other books which were making the rounds. The interesting thing, however, is that Jessup was approached by naval officials and shown an annotated copy of his own book, which had been sent to them by persons unknown. Later, a Carlos Allende, apparently one of 3 mysterious informants, contacted Jessup, insinuating that he and the 3 other annotators were representatives of an ancient high-tech Earth-based society of possible gypsy heritage. The notations and comments were apparently based on the secret knowledge of their race. They spoke of force fields, aerial ships, forces working in the Bermuda Triangle, ancient nuclear war on Earth, diamond crystals, and many other subjects of a highly technical nature. What caught the Navy's interest, however, were references to the so-called Philadelphia experiment, a Navy project which has been confirmed by others that involved an attempt to make a destroyer, the USS Eldridge, invisible optically as well as to radar. An intense electromagnetic field was allegedly generated, and the ship did go invisible to the point that its waterline could be seen in the water, minus the ship itself. But then something happened. A brilliant blue flash was observed, and the men on the ship were thrown into chaos. Apparently, the experiment in its attempt to make a ship invisible had broken through the electromagnetic barrier between 2 worlds and loosed a whole Pandora's box of unknown forces. What happened from that point on has been debated. Some of these reported side effects included the appearance of greenish fogs similar to those observed in the Bermuda Triangle, nicknamed the molasses or the push. In some cases, the death of servicemen who became caught up in possible underlying electrical currents which set their bodies on fire in a type of spontaneous human combustion. The permanent disappearance of servicemen during and after the experiments into a parallel time-space reality. The induced invisibility, time freezing, or teleporting of Navy workers and at least one ship at the Philadelphia shipyard. Workers in the experiment state that a horrifying side effect involved the tendency of workers to phase out into another, parallel time-space existence wherein they might be able to observe our world yet would be invisible and intangible, phantoms who are neither alive or dead as we know it. Some reports included a jet pilot involved in the original experiment who just disappeared from the cockpit his aircraft, causing the death of a passenger. A man who walked through a wall in the sight of his family and was never seen again. A group of men involved in the experiment who disappeared into and out of a greenish fog during a barroom brawl to the consternation of their opponents. And at least one man who was presumed to have died or disappeared in one of the experiments, who would appear out of nowhere at his mother's home, crying and asking for food, etc. In at least one case, there was the recovery of crewmen who were caught in a time freeze for several decades, only to be pulled from an alternate time flow by none other than Dr. John von Neumann and his associates. Actual non-paradoxical time travel, the only kind that reportedly exists or can exist, may have been involved in this recovery. The experiments were reportedly assisted by Nikola Tesla, Dr. von Neumann, T. Townsend Brown, Edward Cameron, John Hutchinson, Dr. Emil Kurtenauer, and other top scientists, utilizing Einsteinian theory. However, Tesla reportedly sabotaged one of the first experiments after being convinced it would be harmful to the humans involved. Rumor had it that Tesla was in contact with extraterrestrials, Pleiadians operating from the red planet Mars, and that UFOs were involved with the experiment in some way, attempting to guide the experiments in an advisory capacity via their contacts with Nikola Tesla. Tesla allegedly quit the project over the fact that too many servicemen were being sacrificed by well-meaning Nazi phobes who were insistent on developing the technology to aid the war effort before the Germans could gain the upper hand in the war. The UFO occupants in contact with Tesla allegedly warned of the dangers, however many these warnings went unheeded by Navy intelligence. Note, 40 years later the project was reportedly taken over and continued by a cabal of CIA agents in league with the Bavarian Illuminati of Germany and its fellow occult lodge, the Bavarian Thule Society, which had created the Nazi Empire. These experiments were carried out in an underground base below Montauk Point, Long Island, and involved time-space window experiments and mass microwave mind control. However, by that time, the Pleiadians were out of the picture altogether, since these fascists who had wrested control of the Philadelphia technology from Navy intelligence were at that time in full cooperation with the alien Greys in a joint effort to establish a one-world national socialist empire. This war between Navy and Nazi intelligence went underground after the Allied invasion of Germany. There are allegations that Navy Admiral Richard E. Byrd and 4,000 elite Navy forces even made a secret attempt to destroy a super-secret underground Nazi stronghold in Antarctica, codenamed New Berlin. This massive base was reportedly inhabited by over 2,000 Nazi SS scientists and nearly 1,000 lay Nazis and slave workers from the concentration camps, all of whom had mysteriously disappeared from Germany throughout the course of the war. This secret war is said to continue today within the Nevada military complex between Navy Intelligence's Com-12, who maintain contact with the Pleiadians, and the CIA Thule Society's Aquarius cult, which has maintained ties with the reptilian Greys that may date back before the beginning of World War II, Branton. As for M.K. Jessup, who was the recipient of several of the Allende revelations, the Philadelphia experiment was described in even more detail within the letters that he received from the mysterious Carl Allen, or Carlos Allende. Could Allende's contemporaries have been tied in with the UFOs that allegedly guided the experiments? Jessup continued in his investigation of the Philadelphia experiment, or Project Rainbow. At one point, he informed a research associate that he had some startling revelations and that he would bring the information over to him personally. Jessup left to deliver the revelations, but he never arrived at his friend's house. It is almost as if some dark organization was intent on preventing these revelations, whatever they were, from reaching the public. Jessup was found suffocated to death in his car, near a park, the result of carbon monoxide poisoning via a hose which was attached to his tailpipe and run into the car. It was said that when he was found, Jessup was still barely alive. However, there were no reports of any attempts to save his life. In fact, the research documents containing the revelations never turned up, and Jessup took his secret with him to the grave. The authorities who responded to his death seem to be at least partially implicated. There is also the strong possibility that Jessup's death was fixed to look like a suicide. The mystery has not yet been solved. John Keel, in his book Our Haunted Planet, pp. 113-114, relates the following. Another group of CIA baiting researchers is now overlapping into ufology. They are the comparatively small teams of amateur sleuths dedicated to investigating the assassination of President Kennedy. Here, the black Cadillacs and the slight dark men in black suits are viewed as Cubans and CIA agents. Paranoia runs high because now over 50 witnesses. As of 1968, reporters and assassination investigators have met with sudden death under the most suspicious circumstances. The full story of Kennedy's murder in Dallas in 1963 is filled with incredible details, many of them similar to things found in the most mysterious of the UFO incidents. Photos and physical evidence have vanished or been tampered with, just as in so many UFO cases. A wide assortment of mystery men have been involved, including doppelgangers of the late Lee Harvey Oswald. See Richard Popkins' The Second Oswald. This other Oswald even turned up at a public rifle range before the assassination, making a nuisance of himself, so the witnesses would be sure to remember him. He fired an unusual gun, which spat out balls of fire at the target. He also visited an automobile showroom and went for a demonstration ride in a new car. The real Oswald could not drive. His whereabouts at the time of these incidents are known, and he was nowhere near the rifle range and auto agency. The huge Warren report contains numerous pieces of sworn testimony describing MIB-type men in the vicinity of Dealey Plaza and the school book depository. Building immediately before and after the assassination, long-haired men were seen. This may not sound extraordinary, but remember that long hair was most unusual in 1963. The Beatles did not begin to make an impression until 1964, and the long hair fad did not get underway until 1965-66. Researcher Val Valerian, in the early 1990s, investigated the experiences of a woman who claimed abductions on numerous occasions near Mount Lassen, California. See Leading Edge magazine, June 1992 issue. Her abductors, she claimed, were humans of a generally unsympathetic and manipulating nature who were working with the reptilian Greys. During her encounter, she saw the typical Greys, a larger Grey with orange-red eyes and vertical slit pupils, and of course the humans themselves. At one point, a woman took off a helmet in front of her, which seemed to be used to cover her features. Immediately, someone from another room began cursing and told her to put the helmet back on. This abductee also referred to a head doctor who implemented a type of induced psychosis, split personality, on her through some type of techno-hypnotic manipulation. Miss Lassen has been described by others as being a doorway to another world, and according to early contributors to Ray Palmer's Amazing Stories magazine during the Shavarian era, Strange voices have been heard there, and even rocks from the size of pebbles to basketball size have mysteriously showered down on people who have approached certain areas of the mountain, and this without any outward sign of volcanic activity from the mountain itself. Some years ago, a man by the name of Ralph B. Fields submitted an account to Amazing Stories magazine, Dekier 1946 issue, pp 155-157, with the assurance that it was true and actually happened. He and a friend of his who lived at the base of Mount Lassen in California stated that they had read an article in a magazine telling of the unusual quality of bat guano as a fertilizer, and that it was a very valuable resource. Hoping to make a quick buck, they decided to climb the mountain in search of caverns which might contain the valuable fertilizer. On about the third day of their journey, they discovered behind an outcropping of rock a small entrance to a cave at about the 7,000 fs-ton level. They immediately chose to explore and soon found that the passage widened considerably. They noticed that the walls seemed to be smooth and glazed, as if the rock had been fused by intense heat in some ancient time. They continued deeper until, to their horror, they saw a light up ahead of them. Shortly after this, they were confronted with 5 normal-looking men wearing the usual surface attire that was common at the time, flannel shirts, etc. These strangers asked the 2 young men what they were doing, and when they explained about the guano, they had the impression that the men did not believe them. One of them, appearing to be in his mid-50s, said, "I think you had better come with us." They were then taken to a large machine or contrivance nearby which appeared to be sled-like, with a copper-colored metal-like sheet covering its underside. It also seemed to hover perpetually a few inches above the ground. At that point, they were taken on to the sled, which they later learned was constructed, along with the tunnel itself, by an ancient and possibly antediluvian race, and was based on a carbon and possibly electromagnetic propulsion system. The sled could reach great speeds and seemed to follow a metal strip that ran along the center of the underground road. As if this were not enough, they were surprised once again when another light quickly approached from the distance, a similar vehicle. Eventually, the other sled, as well as the one they were on, slowed and came to a stop only a few yards from each other. Their captors fled in terror while the 2 explorers remained on the sled, confused at this strange drama being played out before them. They noticed a brilliant pencil beam of light which shot forth from the other sled and caught the fleeing men in their path. These new arrivals soon made it known to Ralph Fields and his friend that the men who had taken them captive were the Horlocks. They made it known that it was fortunate that they had come this way, otherwise you would have become Horlocks yourselves, and we would have had to kill you also. Just what a Horlock was they did not specify, but in connection with other accounts, they may have been mind-altered human pawns of a malevolent race, possibly even the serpent race, or Greys, if we consider later reports of collaboration between humans and reptilians near Mount Lassen. These men did not explain much, other than the fact that there were many evil persons in the underground world who have caused them, as well as those on the surface, considerable harm. One of the men stated that such men were safe because the outside world generally did not believe that they or their world existed. The dilemma of these new arrivals, however, was that they felt compelled to keep the knowledge of certain of the ancient technologies that had been discovered in the caverns, and much of the operation of which still remained unexplained even to these cavern dwellers, away from those on the surface. Otherwise, we might be inclined to destroy ourselves with these technological forces that we know very little about, based on our past experience of twisting scientific discoveries into weapons of destruction. Fields and his friend were allowed to return to the surface, but were warned never again to enter the caves. The above account seems to tie in with yet another report which involved a group of speleonauts who entered one of several caverns west or northwest of Cushman, Arkansas. These explorers claim to have descended 5 to 6 miles, over a period of several consecutive explorations, into deep and extensive cavern systems. At one point, they claimed to have broken into a glazed tunnel of apparent human construction, which was lined with metal-hard yet transparent tunnel walls. Through these transparent tunnel walls, they were able to occasionally observe a whole Hadean-like world of bizarre subterranean creatures, including hairy humanoids who appeared to be in conflict with a race of oversized serpents or snakes, and even giant insects, cavern moths, and so on. The most interesting part of their expedition, which was recorded in the Hollow Hassle newsletter, formerly edited by Tal Levesque and Mary Davis, was their alleged encounter with a race of humans approximately 8 feet tall with pale blue skin. These people were similar in description to a certain group of aliens referred to by John Lear and others, which were reportedly encountered by certain astronauts on the moon, a top secret which the government may never admit to. The Cavers described them as about 7 to 8 feet tall and possessing large wraparound eyes, but nevertheless human in every other respect. The explorers insisted that they were led to an underground city via a type of hidden elevator, and were even shown deeper caverns of immense size in which could be seen ancient repositories left there by a highly advanced, scientifically antediluvian race, some of the contents of which, they were told, remained sealed to that day. This may have been the same ancient culture which left the machines that were described in the Ralph Fields account. The explorers were told, via a type of translating device, that the inhabitants of this particular cavern city were descended from a family that, in our own traditions, would correspond to the biblical description of the family of Noah, that they had a book of laws somewhat similar to our Bible, and that they had come to the Western Hemisphere thousands of years previous and discovered this already existing subterranean world. They also stated that some of their ancestors had left the Earth to explore the other planets and stars long ago. Whether the following item has any connection with the people allegedly encountered by these speleologists is uncertain. The following was related by John Keel in his book, The Mothman Prophecies. The Cherokees have a tradition, according to Benjamin Smith Barton's New Views of the Origins of the Tribes and Nations of America, 1798, that when they migrated to Tennessee, they found the region inhabited by a weird race of white people who lived in houses and were apparently quite civilized. They had one problem. Their eyes were very large and sensitive to light. They could only see at night. Is it possible that these people may have later taken up a cave-dwelling lifestyle, if they had not done so previously, to allow themselves more comfortable living conditions? The many caverns west of Cushman, Arkansas, have given rise to many strange legends and stories. There are accounts of vast underground mazes, underground lakes, caves which lead to extremely deep pockets of stagnant air or poison gas, areas where electrical lights will not work, stories of people entering caves and never being seen again, and even accounts of hairy humanoids throwing boulders at intruders, intentionally missing them so as to scare them away. In essence, it is a place which, if Jules Verne had known about it when writing his famous A Journey to the Center of the Earth, might have been the inspiration behind his novel of a daring descent into the underground world. Lieutenant Colonel Wendell C. Stevens, in his book UFO Contact from the Pleiades, a preliminary report, reports on the alleged sixth face-to-face contact between Edward Billy Meyer and the Pleiadian Semjase. He was told of strange people, unknown to us, who live in the interior of mountains and caves beneath the Earth's surface. They are of various types, some with bluish skin, and others who often come to the surface and blend with surface inhabitants, unknown as to their true origin. Ferdinand Ossendowski describes what may be one of the most widely accepted legends in Asia, one which is in fact accepted by millions of people. This legend is described in his book Beasts, Men, and Gods, 1922. Quoting from the chapter The Subterranean Kingdom, Chapter 300-311, we read, "On my journey into Central Asia, I came to know for the first time about the mystery of mysteries, which I can call by no other name. At the outset, I did not pay much attention to it and did not attach to it such importance as I afterwards realized belonged to it, when I had analyzed and connected many sporadic, hazy, and often controversial bits of evidence. The old people on the shore of the river Amil related to me an ancient legend to the effect that a certain Mongolian tribe, in their escape from the demands of Genghis Khan, hid themselves in a subterranean country. Afterwards, a Soyot from near the lake of Nogan Kul showed me the smoking gate that serves as the entrance to the kingdom of Agarti. Through this gate, a hunter formerly entered into the kingdom and, after his return, began to relate what he had seen there. The lamas cut out his tongue in order to prevent him from telling about the mystery of mysteries. When he arrived at old age, he came back to the entrance of this cave and disappeared into the subterranean kingdom, the memory of which had ornamented and lightened his nomad heart. The favorite Gelong Lama of Prince Chultan Bailey and the prince himself gave me an account of the subterranean kingdom. Everything in the world, said the Gelong, is constantly in a state of change and transition. Peoples, science, religions, laws, and customs. How many great empires and brilliant cultures have perished? And that alone which remains unchanged is evil, the tool of bad spirits. More than 60,000 years ago, a holy man disappeared with a whole tribe of people under the ground and never appeared again on the surface of the earth. Many people, however, have since visited this kingdom, Sakyamuni, Undurgagan, Paspa, Khan Babar, and others. No one knows where this place is. One says Afghanistan, others India. All the people there are protected against evil, and crimes do not exist within its bournes. Science has there developed calmly, and nothing is threatened with destruction. The subterranean people have reached the highest knowledge. Note: the 60,000-year period is probably greatly exaggerated. There have apparently been several migrations of surface tribes over the millennia and centuries into what might be referred to as this subterranean continent of Agharta. According to an American monk by the name of Ernest Dickhoff, as described in his book Agharta, Health Research, CA, some of the human inhabitants of this realm had established themselves as residents only within the last few centuries. This took place when an Asian prince entered with an army of 400 followers and fought with and drove out a race of reptilians, or serpent men, who had taken possession of these caverns. This invasion was initiated after it was found that these serpent beings were using black witchcraft to manipulate the minds and spirits of humans on the surface in a very negative way. According to one source, over 20,000 persons of various different tribes and cultures now reside in Agharti, and many, more millions on the surface in Asia, accept the existence of such a mysterious realm, according to writers such as Ferdinand Ossendowski, Nicholas Roerich, and others. It is said that ancient library temples exists between the surface of Asia and Agharti, in underground vaults to which certain Asian initiates have access. Below or beyond these vaults, through hidden passages, the kingdom itself is believed to exist. Branton. Prince Chultan Bailey added, "This kingdom is Agharti. It extends throughout all the subterranean passages of the whole world. I heard a learned lama of China relating to Bogdo Khan that all the subterranean caves of America are inhabited by the ancient people, who have disappeared underground. Traces of them are still found on the surface of the land. These subterranean peoples and spaces are governed by rulers owing allegiance to the king of the world." Note: if the subterranea of America was once mostly inhabited by humans who migrated there from the surface or other parts of the inner world, then the fact of the modern-day infiltration of the saurian or serpent races, of which the Greys apparently make up the majority, into the underground of America must suggest that the major infestation occurred sometime within the last few centuries. The so-named King of the World is apparently a reference to the present of a long succession of leaders over the Council of Agharti, which would probably make whoever held such a position one of the most influential men in the world, for good or evil. And in fact, according to former Dulce-based security worker Thomas Costello, certain of the U.S. presidents in the past have not only held conferences with the ruling council in Telos, but also with these kings of Agarthy. Telos, the colony below Mount Shasta, is reportedly a western branch of the Agarthy Federation. A succession of many such kings have allegedly reigned over this underground realm, most of them probably receiving more adoration than they deserve, having apparently been regarded as gods by some of the residents of the subterranean world, if the king of the world appellation is any indication. This would not necessarily be the fault of these kings or leaders, many of whom, according to sources, have acknowledged a higher potentate than themselves and prayed to Almighty God on behalf of humanity. Just like the popes of Rome or rulers, secretary-generals, prime ministers, and presidents of the surface nations, these Agarian kings possess their own personalities, some being perhaps more suited to reign than others. Nevertheless, they should be respected as the elected or chosen representatives or spokespersons for perhaps tens of millions of persons who dwell within the inner world. The name of one such king, according to one source, was Rigdon Jayepo. At this writing, the names of other Agarian rulers are unknown, except perhaps to the inhabitants of Agarthy or Agartha itself. Prince Chultan, speaking to the author, continued, "In underground caves there exists a peculiar light which affords growth to the grains and vegetables and long life without disease to the people. There are many different peoples and many different tribes. An old Buddhist Brahmin in Nepal was carrying out the will of the gods in making a visit to the ancient kingdom of Genghis, Siam, where he met a fisherman who ordered him to take a place in his boat and sail with him upon the sea. On the third day they reached an island where he met a people having two tongues, which could speak separately in different languages. They showed to him peculiar, unfamiliar animals, tortoises with 16 feet and 1 eye, huge snakes, with a very tasty flesh, and birds with teeth which caught fish for their masters in the sea. These people told him that they had come up out of the subterranean kingdom and described to him certain parts of the underground country. The Lama Turgut, traveling with me from Urga to Peking, gave me further details. The capital of Agarthy is surrounded with towns of high priests and scientists. It reminds one of Lhasa, where the palace of the Dalai Lama, the Potala, is the top of a mountain covered with monasteries and temples. In cars strange and unknown to us, they rush through the narrow cleavages inside our planet. Some Indian Brahmins and Tibetan Dalai Lamas, during their laborious struggles to the peaks of mountains, which no other human feet had trod, have found their inscriptions on the rocks, footprints in the snow, and tracks of wheels. The blissful Sakya Muni found on one mountaintop tablets of stone carrying words which he only understood in his old age, and afterwards penetrated into the kingdom of Agarthy, from which he brought back crumbs of the sacred learning, preserved in his memory. Ferdinand Ossendowski remembered a particular conversation with one Lama. "How many persons have ever been to Agarthy?" I questioned him. "Very many," answered the Lama, "but all these people have kept secret that which they saw there." In his book Shambhala, 1930, Frederick A. Stokes, Comer, N.Y., writer and traveler Nicholas Roerich adds some additional insights into human habitation of underground regions of Central Asia. In his chapter, Subterranean Dwellers, we read the following words. "In the Altai Mountains, in the beautiful upland valley of Wimon, a hoary old believer, Starover, said to me, 'I shall prove to you that the tale about the Chud, the subterranean people, is not a fantasy. I shall lead you to the entrance of the subterranean kingdom.' On the way through the valley surrounded by snowy mountains, my host told us many tales about the Chud. It is remarkable that Chud in Russian has the same origin as the word wonder. So perhaps we may consider the Chud a wonderful tribe. My bearded guide told how once upon a time in this fertile valley lived and flourished the powerful tribe of Chud. They knew how to prospect for minerals and how to reap the best harvest. Most peaceful and most industrious was this tribe. But then came a white czar with innumerable hordes of cruel warriors. The peaceful, industrious Chud could not resist the assaults of the conquerors, and not wishing to lose their liberty, they remained as serfs to the white czar. Then, for the first time, a white birch began to grow in this region, and according to old prophecies, the Chud knew that it was the time for their departure, and the Chud, unwilling to remain subject to the white czar, departed under the earth. Only sometimes can you hear the holy people singing. Now their bells ring out in the subterranean temples. But there shall come the glorious time of human purification, and in those days the great Chud shall again appear in full glory. Thus the old believer concluded. We approached some low, stony hill. Proudly he showed me, here we are. Here is the entrance to the great subterranean kingdom. When the Chud entered the subterranean passage, they closed the entrance with stones. Now we stand just beside this holy entrance. We stood before a huge tomb encircled by great stones, so typical of the period of the Great Migrations. Such tombs, with the beautiful remains of Gothic relics, we saw in South Russian steppes and in foothills of the northern Caucasus. Studying this hill, I remembered how during our crossing of the Karakoram Pass, my size, the Ladakhi, asked me, "Do you know that in the subterranean caves here many treasures are hidden, and that in them lives a wonderful tribe which abhors the sins of earth?" And again, when we approached Khotan, the hooves of our horses sounded hollow as though we rode above caves or hollows. Our caravan people called attention to this, saying, "Do you hear what hollow subterranean passages we are crossing? Through these passages, people who are familiar with them can reach far-off countries." When we saw entrances to caves, our caravaneers told us, "Long ago people lived there. Now they have gone inside. They have found a subterranean passage to the subterranean kingdom. Only rarely do some of them appear again on the earth. At our bazaar, such people come with strange, very ancient money, but nobody could ever remember a time when such money was in usage here." I asked them if we could also see such people, and they answered, "Yes. If your thoughts are similarly high and in contact with these holy people, because only sinners are upon the earth and the pure and courageous people pass on to something more beautiful. This is not to say that there are not subterranean areas where evil abounds, but that there are apparently protected areas where animosity between fellow human beings is greatly discouraged." Branton. Great is the belief in the kingdom of the subterranean people. Through all of Asia, through the spaces of all deserts, from the Pacific to the Urals, you can hear the same wondrous tale of the vanished holy people. One such persistent tale is that of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Residents of modern Israel claim descent from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and half of the tribe of Levi who remained behind following the great separation of Israel in the time of Solomon. The only known people who claim descent from other Israelite tribes are the so-called Black Jews of Ethiopia, who insist that they are descended from the tribe of Dan. This leaves 812 tribes unaccounted for, or rather, as some believe, 912 tribes, because in the book of Revelation, the 2 Josephite lines of Ephraim and Manasseh are considered as distinct tribes. Interestingly, the tribe of Dan does not appear in the book of Revelation among the 144,000 priests, 12,000 from each of the 12 restored tribes. This restoration has yet to take place, possibly because Dan was the tribe most responsible for leading Israel into Old Testament apostasy and idolatry. The only record of the missing 912 tribes appears in the 13th chapter of the book of the Second Esdras, one of the apocryphal books containing Jewish legend and tradition, which were written in the 400-year non-prophetical period between the end of the Torahic or Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament periods. This contains only a cryptic remark that the lost tribes entered an unknown land to the extreme north or northeast, called Arzareth, from where they will one day return in power, Branton. Even far beyond the Ural Mountains, the echo of the same tale will reach you. Often you hear about subterranean tribes. Sometimes an invisible holy people is said to be living behind a mountain. Sometimes either poisonous or vitalizing gases are spread over the earth to protect someone. Sometimes you hear how the sands of the great desert shift, and for a moment disclose treasures of the entrances of subterranean kingdoms, but none would dare to touch those treasures. You will hear how, in the rocks, in the most deserted mountain ranges, you can see openings which connect with these subterranean passes, and how beautiful princesses once upon a time occupied these natural castles. From distances one might take these openings for eyries because all which belongs to the subterranean people is concealed. Sometimes the holy city is submerged, as in the folklore of Netherlands and Switzerland. And there is folklore that coincides with actual discoveries in the lakes and along the sea coasts. In Siberia, in Russia, Lithuania, and Poland, you find many legends and fairy tales about giants who lived at times in these countries but afterwards, disliking the new customs, disappeared. In these legends, one may recognize the specific foundations of the ancient clans. The giants are brothers. Very often, the sisters of the giants live on the other shores of the lakes or the other side of the mountains. Very often, they do not like to move from the site, but some special event drives them from their patrimonial dwelling. Birds and animals are always near these giants. As witnesses, they follow them and announce their departure. The endless kurgans of the southern steppes retain around them numerous stories about the appearance of the unknown warrior, nobody knows from whence. The Carpathian Mountains in Hungary have many similar stories of unknown tribes, giant warriors, and mysterious cities. If, without prejudice, you patiently point out on your map all the legends and stories of this nature, you will be astonished at the result. When you collect all the fairy tales of lost and subterranean tribes, will you not have before you a full map of the migrations? According to the self-professed Telosian, Charula ducks, Agartha is the largest human subterranean culture in the world. Also, according to American Buddhist Robert E. Dickhoff in his book Agartha, referred to above, some of the Agarthan cavern networks were formerly controlled by the serpent people. These may have been antediluvian systems that were later taken over by the reptilian hominoids, who left the surface of the earth to preserve their race from human animosity, an animosity that was fully justified. These caverns were located beneath the region of Tibet, which would place them between the Agartha networks to the northeast that were occupied by humans, and the Patalan networks to the southwest that were traditionally occupied by the reptilians. This is where a major altercation between surface humans and subterranean reptilians took place in recent centuries, according to Robert Dickhoff. Some of the reptilians escaped, according to other sources, back to the deeper cavern systems below the Himalayas and Hindustan, underneath which, according to Hindu legend, lies the dark and forbidden seven-leveled cavern world of the Nagas, or the serpent beings. Hindu legends say that the underworld capital of the Nagas empire, an empire which has been referred to in different writings as Nagaloka, Snake World, or Patala, is a major center of reptilian activity known as Bhogavita. The Nagas, a race of 7-8 feet tall green-skinned hominoid lizards, are reportedly very cunning and intelligent and have bases all over the planet. A major base which they still maintain below Tibet is reportedly located in the mountain surrounding Lake Manasarawar, Sea on the Shores of Endless Worlds by Andrew Thomas, Souvenir Press, Leicester, London, England, 1974. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. I'm the host. Until next time.